The moment my divorce proceedings began, my soon-to-be ex-husband strutted into the courtroom wearing a smirk that screamed victory. He leaned in close, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're walking out of here with absolutely nothing." His new girlfriend, seated behind him, let out a mocking laugh loud enough for the entire room to hear. "She doesn't deserve a dime of his money," she sneered. I didn't flinch. I didn't even turn to look at them. Instead, I calmly reached into my bag, pulled out a sealed envelope, and passed it to my lawyer. "Give this to the judge when the moment is right," I whispered. 15 minutes later, the judge opened that envelope, read the first paragraph, and then uttered 4 words that flipped the entire case on its head. "This changes everything," he declared. "My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 39 years old." The final words my husband spoke to me before our hearing began were a cruel promise. "You'll get nothing." He was so sure of himself, so confident in the outcome. A decade earlier, that kind of dismissal would have shattered me. But on that morning, his words barely registered. Because I knew something he didn't, a truth that had been hiding in plain sight for years. To understand how we got there, you have to go back 17 years. I met David when I was 22, and he was 24. He was full of grand ambitions but had empty pockets. I was a bookkeeper with a steady income, a modest apartment, and enough hope to fuel a small army. Hope is the fuel that lights the path to any dream. He wanted to launch a tech startup, and everyone around us called it a reckless gamble. I didn't see it that way. I saw his potential. When we married a year later, we made a pact. I would be the financial anchor while he chased his vision, and when it paid off, we'd share the rewards together. That was the plan anyway. The first 4 years were a constant struggle. There were months the company didn't make a single sale, and David would come home looking defeated, ready to throw in the towel. I'd sit with him at our cramped kitchen table, pour him a cup of coffee, and remind him why he started. "We'll make it through this," I'd promise. And somehow we always did. I took on every extra shift I could. My salary covered the rent, the bills, the groceries, and even the software licenses when the investors pulled out at the last minute. I put off going back to school. I stopped buying new clothes. I canceled vacations and told myself it was all part of the journey. Every time David thanked me, he'd say the same thing. "One day, all of this will be ours." I believed him without question. Then, everything changed. In the company's 8th year, one of David's products went viral. Suddenly, within a year, his small operation exploded into a multi-state enterprise. He was on magazine covers, giving interviews, and flying across the country for speaking engagements. At first, I was overjoyed. Watching your partner achieve their greatest dream is a beautiful experience, until that success begins to reshape who they are. He stopped asking about my day. Our evenings became monologues about stocks, investors, and expansion plans. He hired a team of assistants for work, but expected me to manage everything at home. When I brought up the idea of finally going to graduate school, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Why?" he asked, as if the question itself was an inconvenience. "What do you mean, why?" I replied, confused. "It's something I've always wanted." He simply shrugged. "There's no point now," he said, dismissing years of my own ambitions. The partnership we had forged was slowly eroding. Business trips grew longer, weekend plans were always canceled, and my concerns were met with the same dismissive response. "You're thinking too much," he'd say. "It's just business." I wanted so badly to believe him, until I found a folder on his desk containing hotel bookings that didn't match any of his official travel schedules. I didn't confront him. Not right away. Instead, I started paying closer attention. The clues were impossible to ignore. Whispered calls taken in the hallway, texts that were deleted the second they came in, and new passwords on his devices. Then one afternoon, I overheard him on the phone. He thought I was out. "I need to wrap this up before the end of the quarter," he said. "I'll file the papers soon." My heart sank. He had been planning to end our marriage for months, without ever telling me. He had already moved on, mentally and emotionally, long before the words were spoken. That night, I didn't cry. I sat alone in the living room, watching the sun rise, and made a choice. If he had already left, I wasn't going to beg him to stay. I didn't fall apart. I built myself back up, brick by brick. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer named Grace Delgado. When I showed her the mountain of evidence I'd gathered, she leaned back in her chair, stunned. "Sarah, how long have you been keeping all this?" she asked. I opened a folder that was 3 inches thick. Bank statements, tax returns, loan documents, and receipts going back over a decade. "I've always believed that paperwork is the only way to really show the truth," I told her. Over the next few weeks, David assembled a team of high-profile attorneys. Rumors from mutual friends started pouring in. They said he was telling everyone he'd built his empire by himself, that I was just a bystander. I never bothered to defend myself. I knew the truth didn't need a loud voice to be heard. On the day of the hearing, I took a deep breath. Grace looked at me. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm ready for the truth to come out." Just then, David walked in, looking like he owned the place. Behind him was his attorney, and trailing them was the woman I recognized from those hotel receipts. She smiled at me smugly. David leaned over and whispered, "You should have taken my offer when you had the chance." I said nothing. As the judge entered, I reached into my briefcase and slid that sealed envelope to Grace. "Give this to the judge when the time is right," I said softly. The courtroom fell into a deep silence. The judge took his seat. David leaned back, completely relaxed, convinced he had already won. He believed the company belonged solely to him, his hard work, his vision, his success. His attorney stood first. "Your Honor," he began, "Mr. Carter built this business from nothing through his own leadership and initiative. While Mrs. Carter was his wife, she had no tangible role in the company's creation or growth. We ask that the court recognize this business as his sole property." David nodded, proud. He glanced at me with a cold smile. It was the same smile he once wore when we were young and in love, but now it held nothing. The judge turned to Grace. "How do you respond, Mrs. Carter's counsel?" Grace rose calmly. "We will address those statements," she said. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she simply placed the sealed envelope on the clerk's desk. "This was prepared by my client," she stated. The judge picked it up. "What is it?" he asked. "A chronological summary of financial support with documentation that has already been submitted in discovery," Grace replied. The judge opened the envelope. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. He started reading. His eyes moved slowly down the first page. He stopped, went back, and read a paragraph twice. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Carter," he said. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. "You compiled these records yourself?" "I did," I said. "I appreciate the clarity of this timeline," he noted, returning to the letter. The first page was purely factual. No emotion, no accusations. It was just a list of dates and numbers. April 2012, Sarah withdrew $26,000 from her savings to meet company payroll when investors pulled out. Documentation attached. August 2013, Sarah took out a second mortgage to cover the business's operating costs during a slow quarter. Documentation attached. March 2014, Sarah turned down a promotion to keep her schedule flexible so she could manage the household while David focused entirely on the business. Then came the emails. One caught the judge's attention. "I'm nothing without you," David had written. "You're the reason this company is still standing. I promise, when we make it, it's going to be ours." Another email read, "Thank you for taking care of everything. I know you're tired, but I couldn't do this without you." The courtroom remained silent as the judge continued. He then pulled up the financial exhibits submitted by both sides. He compared the dates, bank records, and corporate filings. Every few moments, he made a note. Then he looked directly at David. "Mr. Carter," he said. "Yes, Your Honor," David replied, his voice wavering for the first time. "You testified that the business was entirely self-funded after the first year," the judge said. "That's correct," David insisted. The judge lifted a document. "Then can you explain this $26,000 deposit made into the operating account?" David's face went pale. His attorney leaned in, scrambling. "That appears to be—" He stopped, realizing he couldn't explain it. The judge continued. "It matches a withdrawal from Mrs. Carter's account on the exact same date." No one spoke. He turned another page. You also stated that you managed your household independently, yet these records show Sarah paid the mortgage, insurance, and utilities for 4 consecutive years while your business operated at a loss. David shifted uncomfortably. His attorney whispered frantically in his ear. For the first time, the confidence was gone. The judge wasn't finished. There is also an email from you thanking Sarah for covering a missed vendor payment. He looked up. Mr. Carter, were these statements accurate when you wrote them? David hesitated. His attorney cut him off. Your Honor, we'd like to request a recess. The judge raised his hand. Not yet. He returned to my timeline one more time before placing it down. Then he looked at me. Mrs. Carter, he said. Thank you. The room was still. This is not an emotional argument, he said, tapping the timeline. It is a factual one. He looked toward both attorneys. Based on the testimony and these documents, I am ordering a full financial review before any asset division is determined. David's smirk had vanished. The woman behind him stared at the floor. The judge gathered his papers and added one final sentence. When the facts are this clear, they must be examined carefully. 3 weeks later, the court reconvened. During that time, a financial expert reviewed everything: tax returns, corporate accounts, and email records. I didn't spend those weeks celebrating. A marriage had ended, and no settlement could fix that. But when I walked back into the courtroom, David looked like a different person. He still wore an expensive suit, but his confidence had evaporated. The judge entered, read the final report, and spoke calmly. The financial review confirms that Mrs. Carter made significant documented contributions during the formative years of the company. Several earlier statements were incomplete. The judge continued, the marital assets will be divided based on the verified financial records and applicable law. That was it. No dramatic showdown. Just the facts. After months of anxiety, the truth had finally spoken. The hearing ended in under an hour. As people filed out, David remained seated. His attorney packed up and left. The other woman slipped out without a word. For the first time in a long time, we were alone. He looked at me. Sarah, he said. I paused. I was wrong, he said, his voice shaking. I told myself that because I was the face of the company, everything before it didn't matter. But it did. He looked down at his hands. I convinced myself I built it alone because admitting I depended on you was too hard. His eyes met mine. I'm sorry. I felt no anger, only a quiet acceptance. I didn't support you because I wanted credit, I said. I did it because I loved you. He nodded. I know. Another long silence fell between us. I never wanted this to be a battle, I said. Neither did I, he admitted. I just wanted the truth. He closed his eyes. You deserved that. I wished him well. Not because he had earned it that day, but because holding on to bitterness would only chain me to a past I was ready to leave behind. A month later, the settlement was finalized. It was fair, not a fortune, not a symbol, simply fair. For the first time in years, I wasn't building someone else's dream. I was building my own. Instead of buying a big house, I invested in what I had put off for 15 years, my own consulting business. I wanted to help small family-run companies organize their finances and grow. Ironically, the dream I delayed while helping David became the foundation of my new life. When my first client walked through the door, they reminded me of us so many years ago, young, hopeful, trying to build something meaningful. But this time, I wasn't standing behind someone else's vision. I was standing in my own. People sometimes ask if I felt victorious after the divorce. The truth might surprise them. I never wanted revenge. Revenge keeps you looking backward. What I wanted was acknowledgement, not applause, not pity, just the simple recognition that quiet sacrifices matter. The courtroom gave me that. But something much more important happened long before that judge read my letter. I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's approval. For years, I thought my value came from being appreciated. I was wrong. My value had always been there. The judge didn't create it. The documents didn't create it. They just revealed what had always been true. The strongest foundation you can build is the one beneath your own 2 feet. As I locked the door to my new office at the end of my first day, I smiled. The greatest thing I walked away with wasn't in any settlement. It was knowing that the strongest foundation I would ever build was the one I was standing on myself.